My name is Sonny Garg. I was in the class of 1999 and 2000. Given this is a John Gardner Legacy of Leadership Award, I thought it would be appropriate to start with a Gardner quote. Leaders, Gardner wrote, come in many forms, with many styles, and diverse qualities. There are quiet leaders, and leaders one can hear in the next county. Some find strength in eloquence, some in judgment, some in courage. Harold Richmond embodied the quiet leader. He quietly led in areas that were too often ignored or left for another day. Areas like foster care, America's inner cities, mental health policy. Harold always found a way to give voice to those who were most marginalized, most disenfranchised, most forgotten in our society. And he did it in a way that you hardly noticed he was there. And you hardly noticed you were being led. He was the quintessential leader as follower. Soon after Harold's death, I was commiserating with Marjorie Benton, who was the White House Fellow Commissioner, the chair of the commission, for 8 years during Clinton, and a dear friend of Harold's. And she was telling me how Harold had made her a better person, how Harold and she used to argue about who was whose mentor and mentee, going back and forth. And as she was speaking, I kept coming back to this quote in my head by Oliver Wendell Holmes, where he said, I would not give a fig for the simplicity this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. And as I was sitting there talking to Marge, it occurred to me that really that other side of complexity was where wisdom and humility lived, and it's kind of where Harold was born. And it's where Harold tried to bring the rest of us through the course of his life. When I first met Harold, I was in my 4th year of college. And I say 4th year to give you a sense of my extended stay in college. And I was certainly stuck on the simplicity this side of complexity. One professor had referred to me as a punk, another as the most unacademic student he had ever had. I had just about as many incompletes as I did grades on my transcripts. And I was prone to wearing and showing up in Harold's class with ripped jeans, dangling earrings, and a baseball cap backwards, which may have been an appealing kind of look, a rebellious look, if not for the fact that I was about 100 pounds and wore Coke bottle glasses. So, but it was in Harold's class that really I found I was exposed and experienced Harold's magic. And I was transformed in a way that so many other people were transformed. As in other forums, Harold was always unassuming, saying very little, asking more questions than he was providing answers. And he was being, as was written in the Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, a peer and an instructor at the same time. It was in that classroom, and it was over the past 2 decades, that I came to realize 2 truths that Harold personified. The first, and to borrow from Gardner again, is that life is a great opportunity, brilliantly disguised as an insoluble problem. And 2, that you can't get to the other side of complexity by yourself, but only with others. These truths were brought home this morning when Michael Lindsay was speaking, the professor from Rice University, and he was the fellow who just wrote the book on the White House Fellows. And he was asked by one of the former fellows, well, what is it that we need to do better? What is it that we need to challenge ourselves with? And, you know, essentially what they were asking him was, like, when we take respites from admiring ourselves and our achievements and our influence, what is it we're supposed to do better? And he said 2 things. He said, one is don't get caught up in the rarefied air that we breathe, and that don't distance ourselves too much from those who are different, and particularly those who don't have access to privilege. And he said, 2, invest in and mentor and nurture young people. And as he was saying this, Marlene kind of leaned over to me and said, sounds like Harold. And that was certainly true. And for me, for my youth, from being a mentee of Harold's, it's all the way to living in a rarefied atmosphere today, Harold has been my companion on that journey from simplicity through complexity and hopefully somewhere closer to simplicity on the other side. It was Harold I've consulted in every major decision in my life, from getting married to going to graduate school. It was Harold who wrote me my first recommendation to college, my first to graduate school, my first job. It was Harold who hired me out of graduate school when nobody else would. It was Harold who encouraged me to apply to the White House Fellows Program, and it was Harold who wrote me a recommendation for the program. And like so many others that he mentored, inspired, and supported, I miss Harold. I miss him terribly. And I feel very strongly what his friend Frank Farrell said at his memorial service, that if there was ever anybody who deserved 20 more years, it was Harold. But what was remarkable about Harold was not only that he mentored and influenced so many people, but that he had the foresight to build institutions to continue to do so for generations to come. And so for me, that truly is the great legacy of leadership of Harold Richmond. And I think in only the way that Harold could, sitting on that other side of complexity, hanging out there with his warm tea and his chocolates and maybe a squash racket, I think from him to us, it's a quiet challenge of what we need to do with our lives. So thank you, and thank you, Marlene, and Robert and Andrew, for the privilege of sharing a few words about Harold.